A clone or a clone with a twist? What's the difference and what's the better choice? Well, let's talk about that today. Hey guys, I'm George, the nice medic gentleman, and it's time for your dose of some fragrance content. It's also time for another episode of a fragrance talk. Today's subject, today's topic will be straight up clones, clones with a twist, inspirations, hybrid clones, and all that interesting stuff. Now, when I started my clone fragrance journey a couple of years ago, when I started exploring clone fragrances, just like any other normal person, at first I was really looking for the clone fragrance that will get me the closest scent-wise to the original fragrance, and I wasn't aware that much of the type of different clones that are out there on the markets. But with time and experience mainly, I learned a couple of things. Now, when it comes to clone fragrances, the first major mistake that a lot of people make, especially when they are new to clone fragrances, is that they expect a certain clone that has been hyped up, has become very famous or very well known. They expect that clone to smell like identical to the original fragrance, and that's basically impossible for a couple of reasons, but mainly in order for a clone fragrance to become scent-wise to end up being identical to the original fragrance, we need one of either two things. The first thing is that the clone companies need to get a hand of the original formulation of that original fragrance that they are making the inspiration or a clone, something that's impossible. Pretty much because that's a type of a trade and manufacturer secret. And the other way that this can be achieved is by modern technology. Now nowadays we have this type of machines that analyze the chemical the structure of a fragrance or anything else in that matter, and those machines are quite advanced and they can give you a pretty sort of an good rundown of what's included chemical wise in a scent or in a certain fragrance, but they're not so advanced that they can produce for you a one-to-one list of everything that has been used when a certain original brand creates an original fragrance. So in order to achieve that, we need to get further advances in technology, and maybe in the near or a little bit more distant future we can get to that point, but for the current time the technologies are not so advanced that they can deliver such a thing. So the first major mistake is that people are looking for a one-to-one clones, and that's not possible. And with time and pretty much with experience, I've learned that when it comes to clone brands, no matter if they are Middle Eastern brands or European, US clone brands, they go down one of either two paths. The first path is the one that's more traditional, basically trying to create a fragrance that smells as close as possible to the original fragrance. The other path is that they intentionally create slightly different fragrances, those that we call inspirations or hybrid clones or whatnot. So those are the two major type of clone fragrances that you can get nowadays. And I've prepared a few examples of straight up clones and of clones that have a bit of a twist, or they're hybrid, or they serve more as an inspirations. And so to illustrate what I'm trying to tell you in today's video, I've prepared a few examples. On my right side I have fragrances that I consider to be straight up clones, or fragrances that get pretty much as close as possible to the original ones that they've been inspired by. And on my left side I have those type of clones that are more inspirations, or something that we call hybrid clones as well. And let's start with a couple of examples. Let's start with the example of a clone and then an inspiration. In my right hand I'm holding Rosasi Havas Black. This one is a straight up clone of Nishane Hashivat. Yes, it's not identical to Hashivat, but this gets very close scent wise to Nishane Hashivat. On my left side I'm going to show you a fragrance from the brand of Arabiat Prestige, which is called Hypnotic Amber. Now this as well is inspired by Hashivat, but this feels a lot different. This is more an inspiration rather than being a straight up clone, because the guys from Arabiat Prestige, they have taken the original scent profile and they've twisted it quite a bit. This, for an example, feels less fresh, less citrusy in the opening. This feels greener, this feels more floral than the original fragrance. On the dry down feels less mossy and has less sweetness than Nishane Hashivat and Rosasi Havas Black. So this is just a case of a fragrance A clone fragrance that gets very close to the original fragrance, and one that simply gets the idea from the original and develops it into something a little bit different. Then we have, I'm going to give you a few other examples of something that we like to call hybrid clones, or at least personally I like to call hybrid clones. Those are occasions where the clone brand have taken a certain idea, but then they've thrown in bits and pieces of other famous fragrances. And let's give you a couple of examples of that. Again, on my right, in my right hand, I'm holding Liquid Brune from the brand of French Avenue, and this is a superb clone of Parfum de Marly Altair. And this one again is one of those clones that are simply trying to get as close as possible to the original fragrance. On my left side, I have something again from the brand of Arabiat Prestige that's called Lutfach Light in the Heart. This one is a hybrid clone because on one hand this smells a bit like Altair, but then on the other hand this is a lot deeper, a lot sweeter. It lacks the floral notes, that white florals that you'll find in the original fragrance. It lacks some of the spiciness of the original fragrance. It replaces it with more sweetness, with more ambers on the dry down. This is a sort of a hybrid clone between Parfum de Marly Altair and Grand Soir from the brand of MFK. And the end result is interesting and smells quite different to Altair, while at the same time carrying a bit of the scent, a bit of the spirit of Altair itself. Another such example will be with these two. Now, on one hand, I'm holding Salvo Intense from Maison Alhambra, and this is a clone of Dior Sauvage EDP, and this is a straight up clone of Dior Sauvage EDP, again trying to get as close as possible to the original fragrance. And then on the other hand I have Club de Nuit Urban Man Elixir. This takes the Dior Sauvage DNA but also has a bit of a fruity sweetness that you'll find in things like Creed Aventus or Club de Nuit Intense Man, for example. And the end result again is pretty interesting. Now this leans heavily into the territory of Dior Sauvage, but definitely feels more fruity and quite a bit different, carrying the Dior Sauvage spirit, but also feeling a little bit different. So those were a couple of examples of straight up clones, inspirations, and also hybrid clones as well. And now let's try to answer the question, what's the better choice? A straight up clone or an inspiration or like a hybrid clone? Now I don't think there's a wrong or right answer here, or like a wrong or right choice. It really depends on what you're looking for. If you really want to get as close as possible to the original fragrances that you're looking clones for, then you should go with a straight up clone. If you are fascinated, just like I with time became fascinated with what Middle Eastern brands and other clone brands around the world are doing, sometimes with the original scent profiles, twisting them, adding bits and pieces, taking out some of the stuff of the original fragrances and coming up with an end result, then you can go with something like an inspired by version or like a hybrid clone. Personally, with time, again, initially when I started my clone fragrance journey, I was really looking for the best, the closest clone to a certain original fragrance. And nowadays, with experience and with time, I've learned to appreciate some of the artistic nature of creating a hybrid clone or an inspiration. I know a lot of people criticize clone fragrances because exactly that, because they lack innovation, because they lack the artistic factor. But to be honest, when a certain clone brands create hybrid clones, or when they create inspirations, I think they add that artistic touch to the original product, even if it means that they combine two original fragrances into one end result. I still think there's a bit of an artistic sort of a touch in doing all that. So again, I don't think there's a wrong or right answer here. It really depends on your personal preferences, but with time I've learned to appreciate inspirations and hybrid clones as well. And I think they have their place in the fragrance industry. And to be honest, I think that as time passes, as we move on with this whole clone thing and Middle Eastern fragrances, I think we'll see more and more inspirations, more and more hybrid clones. If not because of anything else, simply because nowadays clone brands are starting to run out of new ideas, so they'll probably be forced to create something like this, inspirations and hybrid clones. And so guys, in today's episode of Fragrance Talk, I talked about straight up clones, I talked about hybrid clones, about inspiration by fragrances, and I tried to answer what are clones, straight up clones, what are inspirations and hybrid clones, and what is the better choice. I'm also curious to hear your thoughts on this matter. What do you prefer, going for straight up clones or going for inspirations and hybrid clones? Let me know in the comment section below this video. I hope that you found today's video interesting to watch. As usual, if you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in my next video for your dose of some fragrance content. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.